Well, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm Candice Lopez. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the Project Peace Coordinator. Project Peace is Arlington's coordinated community response to domestic and sexual violence. We're partnering with the Y'all's group at Safe Space Nova tonight to honor, recognize, and celebrate National Coming Out Day and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. During the presentation, we will be discussing potentially unhealthy and unsafe relationships, and information about this topic can bring up emotions or feelings that you might want to talk about with somebody else either during or after the presentation. We encourage you to reach out for help if you or someone you know needs it. If you're in Arlington, you can always call the Doorways Hotline at 703-237-0881. I'll put that in the chat box, or the LGBTQ Partner Abuse and Sex Assault Helpline at 866-356-6998. I've also put a link in the chat box that has a whole host of other resources depending on what your need is or anyone else that you might know. So with that, I want to go ahead and hand it over to Y'all's and thank them again for partnering with us tonight for this amazing presentation.
Hi, everyone. We're Y'all's. I'm Oliver. My pronouns are he, him. So we're the group Y'all's, which stands for Youth Advocacy and Leadership Learning Through Social Support. And today we're going to be presenting on gender and sexuality spectrums. What are they and how do they affect youth relationships? And now we're going to go around and each of us is going to introduce ourselves. Like I said, I'm Oliver. And my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, I'm Ashton. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm gonna bring it to our next presenter.
Hi, my name is Sophia, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Julie Alexander, and I use she, her pronouns also.
Maria Slattery, she, her pronouns.
If anybody else wants to introduce themselves, feel free to, since we've got not very many today. No?
Hi, I'm Stella. I use she, her pronouns.
Go ahead, Oliver.
Okay, so during this presentation, you can put your questions in the chat. The chat function, you can find it at the bottom of your screen. It should be there. And if not, there should be 3 dots that you can click on. And in the menu that pops up, you should be able to find the chat. And at the end of the presentation, there's going to be a Q&A portion. So any questions that you have, we will answer them. Yeah. Slide 1, I guess. So the classic acronym is LGBT. L stands for lesbian, so it's a woman who is exclusively attracted to other women. G stands for gay, so a man who is exclusively attracted to other men. People also use gay as an umbrella term for anyone who experiences same-gender attraction. So you may hear like a bisexual person use the word gay to describe themselves as an umbrella term. And mentioning that, B stands for bisexual, so that's a person who is attracted to 2 or more genders. Sometimes this is seen as interchangeable with the term pansexual, which means attraction to all genders, but this topic is highly under debate within the LGBT community. You'll hear a lot of people with different opinions on it. And T stands for transgender, so a person whose gender doesn't match the one assigned to them at birth. So a non-binary person or a person who went female to male. There's a lot of variations on the acronym. A lot of the time people don't fit under the labels in the classic acronym, so they don't feel like lesbian, gay, bisexual, or trans describes them. A Q is often added to represent those who are queer or questioning. You'll hear either one of those for what the Q stands for. Queer was used as a slur once, and now it's used as an umbrella term for people who don't feel represented by one label, but it's really best to ask before you describe someone else as queer. A lot of people still have that trauma from it being a slur, and it emotionally affects some people, and some people have very strong reactions to being called it, so it's definitely best to ask. There's a lot of variations and additional letters added onto the acronym, but like a lot of people sum up a lot of labels by just adding a plus to the end of the acronym. Some people will also add a Q to the end of the acronym in place of that plus.
All right, hello, my name is Ashton again. This is a tool we like to use called the Human Umbrella. It can differentiate gender and sexuality. They are easily mixed up and confused. It's to separate the two identities, and they do not influence each other. So gender is your personal identity and how you relate to yourself. So we have the list of transgender, questioning gender, genderqueer, intersex, agender, and then the typical male and female, which are typically cisgender if you identify with your gender assigned at birth. And then we have on the other side, sexuality, which is who you are emotionally or romantically attracted to, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, questioning sexuality, queer, asexual, heterosexual, and straight. So I am transitioning from female to male, so that does not make me gay if I like women because I identify as a male. And likewise. All right, here we have a really good visual to describe the 4 categories that we have here. We have sex, which is what you are assigned at birth. Typically, we use chromosomes to explain because it is easier. Then we have gender expression, which is how you express yourself. You can use it with clothes, how you feel. You can express like a haircut. Clothes are easier way to explain. Then we have gender identity, which is how you feel and see yourself. So you can use pronouns, which are women, genderqueer, or male. Then we have sexual orientation, which I described earlier, which is who you are sexually and romantically attracted to. So all of these are on spectrums. You do not have to identify strictly with one label. You can say, oh, I don't really feel male or female. So gender expression and identity are all different. And you are the one who says the label, not someone else. So you identify as a label. No one else can influence them besides you. Now, if you are female to male, you might say, well, my sex is assigned at birth female, but I express myself masculine, which is gender expression, and I identify as a male. So I will see myself as a male, but that does not influence sexual orientation, which is who you are attracted to. So gender identity and sexuality are very different. All right, I will pass it off to Oliver.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about gender identity. So gender identity has no relation to sexual orientation. If you're a man, you do not have to be attracted to women and vice versa, and that goes for all different gender identities. So a person's gender may or may not correspond with their sex assigned at birth. So cisgender people are people whose gender identity does match the sex they were assigned at birth. So if you were assigned female at birth, then if you're cisgender, you identify as female. On the other hand, there's transgender people, which is an umbrella term used to describe anyone who doesn't feel that their sex at birth matches the gender that they are. So people who are transgender and on the binary spectrum, so people who were assigned female at birth and are transitioning to male, they're transgender, and the same goes for people who are assigned male at birth and are transitioning to female. Other identities that fall under the transgender umbrella are non-binary, so someone whose gender doesn't fit the gender binary. There's a lot of different genders that people put under non-binary. Some examples of that are genderqueer, a person whose gender identity may change or doesn't fit under one specific label, and gender fluid, someone whose gender identity is defined by a consistent change and isn't necessarily set in male or female. And now I'm handing it back off to Ashton.
All right, we're going to talk about gender expression. So gender expression is how you express your gender to the world, and it is not necessarily related to your identity. And it also changes on the environment you are with. So if you are with family that you are not out to or do not feel comfortable with, and you identify as male, then you might typically dress more feminine to just feel more comfortable in that environment. Might not feel comfortable with yourself, but with others, the gender expression are determined by you, not anyone else. This means you can be non-binary and have more of a feminine or masculine style, the way you cut your hair, your clothes. It has no effect. Your gender identity is your pronouns and how you are yourself. Your expression is how you express, like, for example, clothes. You decide on your pronouns and how you want to dress. I'll pass it off.
Okay, so what is sexual orientation? Put simply, it is a person's sexual identity in relation to their gender and the gender to which they are attracted to. So for example, a heterosexual person would experience opposite gender attraction, a homosexual person would experience same gender attraction, a bisexual person would experience both or all gender attraction, a pansexual person would experience all gender attraction, an asexual person would experience no sexual attraction. And then there are many other identities out there that are constantly being recognized, a lot of them by youth. So one example of this is polyamory, which is basically just when you have multiple partners in a relationship. And there are some discussions as to whether this is an actual sexual identity or just a way of dating. And so this attraction can be romantic or sexual, as some people, like asexuals, don't experience sexual attraction towards anyone. Okay, and here we have some consent basics. Consent, in the way that we've defined it, means to respect people's identities and boundaries. So some important things to keep in mind is that consent starts at the beginning of a relationship, and not just romantic relationships, platonic relationships as well also need a modicum of consent in them. So consent starts at the beginning, not just when you're beginning to get intimate with someone. And there must be continual consent, even for the same thing. If your partner or partners consent to something once, that does not mean they consent to that one thing every single time you want to do it. So there's nonverbal and verbal consent and communication that is expressed in a relationship at any time. And consent can also be retracted at any time. If your partner consents to something at the beginning of your activities, they can retract their consent at any point. And another important note is that polyamorous relationships could not exist without the consent of all parties involved.
All right, we're going to talk about healthy relationships. And the main thing we like to talk about is communication. Open communication needs to happen in any relationship to create it healthy, including expectations that we have listed below. All of these allow you to express what your needs are in the relationship. So we have boundaries. Each individual has the right to set boundaries to have their partner or partners respect. They're negotiable and non-negotiable. So if I express that I do not feel comfortable with a certain boundary, the other person and I will have to say how we feel and then talk and figure out how we can make it respectable in the relationship. Next, we have transparency. It's the ability to be open and honest with your partner or partners about your thoughts and feelings, because you're in a relationship and you want the other person to know what you think is wrong and right and how you really feel. It's important for maintaining a healthy relationship, and when you're in an open relationship, it is important to be transparent. Lastly, we have respect, which is to honor your partner's boundaries. You want to honor the boundaries that they have as you would like the same for you. You don't want to go against something that they said before and then go against all of what you just talked about, and it will ruin the communication.
So there are a lot of influences on LGBTQIA+ relationships that may not be as big of a factor in heterosexual relationships, loosely defined. But some influences can be familial influence. So a couple's relationship with either family can be wildly different and or present as a major obstacle in LGBTQ+ relationships. It can be families who fully support and accept the relationship, or families who pressure the couple to end the relationship, or a partner not being out to their family, which can put a lot of strain on the relationship. Another influence is unsafe or limiting environments. So feeling unsafe in your home life during your youth can be very stifling for people who may be questioning their sexuality or their gender identity. And knowing that your family will be unsupportive can lead individuals to just refrain from exploring their sexuality and potentially be stuck in identities that they don't feel themselves in. Another influence can be having a smaller dating pool can also pressure youth into relationships, as there can be a fear of not finding another partner, which can be very lonely and that kind of thing. And there's also an assumption that LGBTQ+ relationships are not as committed as heterosexual relationships. So there's a lot of kind of cliches maybe in media and a lot of stigma around that. And then there's like the topic of labels. So why labels? Labels can be both a positive and negative in any relationship, really. But for LGBTQ relationships, there's societal labeling. For example, if you've heard the term gal pals, which can be frustrating as it shows a passive lack of acceptance. And there's also assumptions about the platonic relationships between LGBTQ friends that can put a lot of strain on those relationships. Another issue is defining a relationship as lesbian or straight. Just for example, if a woman and a gender non-conforming person are in a relationship, how would that be labeled? That doesn't really fit any conventional norms or labels that we have. So that can put some distress on both parties involved, both or all parties involved in the relationship. And there's also the issue, kind of going back to the first point, of other people wanting to put labels on a relationship or on people in the relationship that they don't have a right to label. Essentially, each person only has the right to label themselves and their own relationships and not anyone else's. But to end on a more positive note, labeling your own relationship can be very validating and empowering for some people, as it can just invoke a sense of euphoria once you're able to really put a label on yourself and be comfortable with your own identity. Okay, so now we have a segment of true or false questions. If you go down and click on participants, you'll be able to see yes or no buttons. So just vote yes for true and no for false as we go through the questions to get some participation in there. So our first true or false question is true or false. If you are in a relationship with someone of the same gender, then you are gay. Or if you are in a relationship with someone of a different gender, you are straight. To get to the yes or no button, just click on participants and they should pop right up.
We have 5 people who have answered, so we're getting some. 1 yes and 4 no.
Okay, I think we'll go see the answer now. Yeah.
Oh,
So this is false. The gender of your partner does not define your sexual orientation, you do. And this can go back to one of our points on the last slide, that no one else can dictate what your relationship is except for yourself. Okay, so our next question is, being in a relationship with a transgender man makes a woman heterosexual or heterosexual, as we have on the slide. But
You 1 yes and 4 no's again.
I
Oh,
I could change the answers. Yeah.
Yep, we have 5 no's now.
Okay, answer time. So this is false. Someone's sexual orientation is not dependent entirely on the sex their partner was assigned at birth. And something to reiterate is that transgender men are men and transgender women are women. So again, it's just up to each individual how they want to define their orientation and their relationship.
All right, continuing with the true and false, we have true or false. Being intimate with someone of the same gender without your partner's consent does not count as cheating if you are in a heterosexual relationship.
We have 6 no's this time. See if anybody wants to change their no's to yes. Oh, 7 no's. No, it's become even stronger no. You ready, Ashton?
Yes. Well, the answer is false. If you are not following your relationship agreement with your partner, then no matter the gender of the person you are intimate with, it is cheating. So there's a big misconception that, oh, if I'm gay, that doesn't count as cheating because my wife is with me. But no matter who you are with, and if you cheated, it is still cheating. All right, true or false? If I am not in a committed relationship, then I do not have to tell my other partners about people I'm intimate with.
Oh, we went down to 5 no's. Oh, but we're going back up. Yep, still 5 no's. Oh, 1 yes. You ready, Ashton? 1 yes and 5 no's.
Well, the answer is false. If you cannot have full consent in the relationship, you do not have all the information about who your partner or partners are with. So we talked about earlier communication. So in a relationship, you have to communicate with each other if you want it to be open or if you don't. So if you're not in a committed relationship and both of you have said that it is not committed, then you probably should tell your partner about who you're intimate with. All right, true or false? If someone is asexual and has a partner, they are in a real relationship.
Finally, 4 yeses and 1 no. Oh, 5 yeses and 1 no. That was quick. You ready?
Yeah. Well, this is very true. The legitimacy of a relationship is not based on sex, but defined by the people involved. So, of course, it's a relationship. Sex is not all about relationships. You can talk to your partner about what you feel comfortable with and what your boundaries are.
Over to you, Oliver.
Sorry. My thing was muted and it wasn't unmuting. So, true or false? In most high schools, health education includes all type of relationships, not just heterosexual relationships.
4 no's and 3 yeses. Oh, now down to one yes and 6 no's. You ready?
So this is false. Health programming and sex education in high schools focuses mainly on heterosexual relationships, and nearly all sex education courses are very heteronormative and cisnormative. So our second question, true or false, LGBT people do not always practice safe sex?
Oh, we're going over to the yeses. 4 yeses and 3 nos. Oh, 6 yeses and 1 no. You ready?
This is true. The majority of people, no matter their sexuality, do not always practice safe sexual behavior. And I'm going to take this opportunity to highly encourage you to always practice safe sex and general safe sex behavior. So not just during what we typically think of as sex, like penetrative sex, also during oral sex and other sexual activities. It's very important to be safe. So just a little bit of information about our group. Once again, we are YALS, and that stands for Youth Advocacy and Leadership Learning Through Social Support. We are a group with Safe Space Nova. YALS meets the first and third Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. Right now we are virtual, but we started out in person. It's for youths ages 13 to 18, and it's focused on LGBT issues. If you're interested in being a part of YALS, please contact Julie. You can see her up with her camera on there. Her email is julie@safespacenova.org, and you can also fill out that interest form on screen. I believe the link will be put in chat.
In just a second, it will be put into chat. And Stella had a really good comment. She said that also the health education focuses mostly on male pleasure and not female pleasure, which is definitely true also.
I believe she said male pressure.
Pressure. Oh,
but that's also true.
Excuse me, I misread. Yes, and anybody else have any questions? That's the majority of ours. And now she's agreeing with me that the pleasure is there too. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask us. And we do, part of the links we'll be putting into the chat too, are where to go and find more information about safe sex practices, especially for LGBTQ, Planned Parenthood, Healthy Bodies is also really good, and Scarleteen is also really good. So, and then some LGBTQ resources. Any questions about anything connected to LGBTQA? These guys are good at answering if they feel comfortable answering it. Or about our group, feel free to ask.
So Denise asked a good question in chat. Any advice on how to get out of an unhealthy relationship? So it depends relationship to relationship. If it's safe, having a conversation with the person in the relationship and either finding a way to fix it, or if you can't fix what's going on, breaking up with them if it's safe. If it's not safe to just break up with them like you would typically, there are a lot of resources to go to. You can go to friends' houses if you live with them. I don't know too much, but Sophia and Ashton, do you want to?
No.
Okay. Oh, you can
Go for it, Sophia.
I mean, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, community resources would probably be a good resource for you. There are some in the chat, I think, for local organizations, but you can also just Google some. If you need something in your area, if you need something quickly. There's some legal help if you need it too. There's always nonprofit legal organizations that can help victims of domestic violence or just unhealthy relationships and that kind of thing. So that's always there for you.
Yeah, in Arlington, it's Doorways, and Candace put the link in the chat again. The other one too is no matter where you are, if you dial 211 and say what resource you're looking for, they can connect you with that. It's a great hotline. So they can connect you to the hotline in your area, or they can connect you to any type of domestic response groups too. So that's a really good, and also suicide and mental health issues. They can also connect you with emergency responses with that also. And 211 is great because it works in any state. So no matter where you are, if you dial 211, it will connect you with that resource, and they are wonderful with the resources wherever you are. Anybody else? Denise thanked us for the information. Brandy has a question. As a victim advocate, is there any resources to support victims isolated by a predator of the opposite gender than the one they're attracted to? To support victims violated by a predator of the opposite gender. Brandy, do you mean if someone's being targeted by someone who is a different sexual attraction than the person has? Is that what you're meaning there?
I think they mean like a lesbian being assaulted by a man.
Yes, yep, and she just said yes. Any resources that you guys know of that you want to talk about with that?
Not anything that specific.
Yeah, again, it would be like the Doorways would be your best help. If you're in a setting like on a college campus too, you should have a Title IX coordinator on the college campuses and at schools that you can reach out to, especially like if the person's pressuring them in a school setting or in the college setting. In the community setting, you've got Doorways and in Arlington, but also 211 would give you that. Alexandria also has a domestic violence shelter also. Oh, and she said for men, 1 in 6 has some great resources, and it's oneins.org, and the link is in the chat. Brandy, does that help answer your question? Yeah, and I think that, you have the same issue, you have kind of sometimes the same issue that you have for anybody who's being raped or pressured into sexual encounters, because a lot of times people will feel their bodies will kind of be aroused even though they don't want to be aroused. And so that can happen for a woman who might identify as a lesbian and have a man pressuring them. Their body may still be aroused, and that sometimes makes them feel very, very scared. And so that same situation can happen, especially if they say, well, wait, I shouldn't be aroused by this person because I'm not usually attracted to them. And so that sometimes can be a real issue with someone who's dealing with sexual orientation issues and identifying with their sexual orientation issues. So that is something else that comes up for them, but it's kind of the whole body betrayal of the body being aroused even though the mind and the person doesn't want to be, and that sometimes is an issue in any sexual encounters. Yeah, it can be very, very, and it sometimes too, it can happen in different types of situations also. So any other questions or thoughts? 2 other presentations that are up for this week too, or 2 that I did earlier in June. So one is on LGBTQ vocabulary, which is kind of what we just did, but going a little bit more into it. And then the other one is looking at social and hidden bias. So really looking at how our biases that we've learned from society and from media, and how that influences how we see others, and especially within how that negatively affects people within the LGBTQ community, or really any oppressed community, that when we hear things over and over that it's not good to be LGBTQ and they're kind of looked down upon society, that sometimes makes us not feel good about who we are, because society tells us that it's better to be this, to be heterosexual, because that's so much more. So that's kind of what that presentation is looking at, and those kinds of things. So feel free to reach out with those. And if you're interested in y'all's, or you're interested in any of the questions or any presentation for the youth, just let us know. We're happy to come, and we've done a couple different presentations, but we're happy to do them again in different areas. Any other questions or comments?
I just again want to thank y'all for doing this presentation. We really appreciate the partnership, and we'll get this, since we've recorded it, can get it out to some other folks to make sure we get it far and wide. Thank you.